legit? This thing from, I was gonna ask you. Pilot IT carrier. Did you get this in your, it's saying they've gotten,
Yeah, no, I haven't
I
seen
don't
it.
dare do anything on my email, without.
Well, I wasn't done painting yet.
Oh, okay. Is this gonna be an abstract, or is this a impressionist?
Original.
That's not legit.
Rob, did you get 2 people for Thursday?
Not yet, I have one.
Okay. I may, if no one else can, I can block out and do a Zoom call again or a Teams call. Let me know.
I'm gonna bring it up there.
Hey, Rob?
Yes.
I just read this, that need 2 people. Did you get 2? It says Audrey. On,
I'm not sure that Audrey
I'm too.
was
She
saying
was saying she can come
to
to this.
this meeting, not that meeting.
Oh, okay.
So I have Chris that he can come. If you are available,
Yes, Thursday?
Thursday at 3 o'clock.
I'm like so,
here.
yeah.
Okay.
I'm so paranoid of every email I get now. This last one I thought was, it was from, says IT security. And it said, well, as you've noticed, we've had some blah, 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 and we have. So I thought, but I didn't touch it till it was that
Don't
day.
fall for those.
Oh, I don't, I'm from
Scams.
Boston. Nothing's
I
good.
found one of them because it looked like it came from our HR person, and it was formatted just like an email she would send. And asking to review a policy, which would be something that she would ask me to do.
Yeah.
Then I got one else like, this wasn't. I've never fallen for those.
No, I don't, I'm really good with the
They're
scam
getting
thing.
much more
I'm actually
sophisticated.
too much, if anything, which is okay. If you need me, leave a message. I know your voice. You know what I mean? Or knock on my door, call my number. Yeah, Thursday. Cool. 3 p.m. Let me get that on my calendario. Here, you said.
Right here in this room.
Right in this
Very room. But they usually set up a table down there on the floor.
Cool. Yeah, I've got to start getting more. I've been so much going on. It's crazy.
That's better than nothing going on.
Well, yeah, up till this last one. This before that we had like 10 days in Hawaii. Okay,
Oh,
perfect.
rough detail. Oh,
Even
beautiful.
Kilauea erupted falls. The
Nice.
whole, yeah, oh yeah. Pele was talking to Kilauea and said, "You need to erupt." It was like perfect. Thursday.
Oh, that
14
sounds good.
cement steps, 92 years old, with his wife, who's almost, she'll be 90, two of them, down to a basement. He hit his head,
Oh, that's terrible.
brain bleed, died like 7, 8 hours later on Thursday night. So we're all week,
That's awful.
tomorrow morning is the funeral, so we're planning all that. So we went from like heaven to
Sorry.
But he was ready, but not now. He was way ready. He had gotten hurt. He broke his neck a couple of years. He was 92 and still, when he was 90, he was climbing Mount Olympus and all the other, the biggest, he's climbed every peak in this place, in this whole state. And he was up till 90, and then he hurt his, broke his neck, but he was still okay. But he couldn't turn all the way. Things like that. He got, so the last 2 years, I don't even want to be here. I can't do it. 92, Dad. It's okay. You don't have to, fly on top of the peaks. So it was good for him, but not.
Yeah, it was interesting. My dad died in 92 and just decided he'd had it, basically.
Yeah, most people at a certain age, if they live that long, say, okay, anytime now.
Yeah.
They're ready.
He was definitely.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Highland City Planning Commission. We will commence the proceedings by having yours truly say the invocation, after which Commissioner Deborah, would you be willing to say the Pledge of Allegiance? Lead us in that. Thank you. Our beloved Father in heaven, we are very grateful that we have bodies and that we are allowed to make choices and that we live in this incredible country. We thank Thee for this beautiful city and our wonderful neighbors and for the really diligent and good-hearted city staff. We are very grateful to be here tonight, and we ask for wisdom and insight so that we can make the best decisions possible for our neighbors. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. Thank you very much. Is there anybody that would fancy making a public appearance? You shock us all, Liz.
I'm Elizabeth Rice, and I kind of told the city council this at the last meeting, so I thought I would just tell you as well. But the mayor had asked a really good question about Canal Boulevard and why it was so wide. When I was on the planning commission some years ago, Canal Boulevard was meant to be a connector. There were not any driveways allowed on that road, and I know there's one now, but that was intended for that. And things changed, like Lehigh put in and actually Highland did too, but put in a subdivision down at that end. 1100 North and American Fork was also meant to go clear to the interstate, and that was on UDOT's radar. And it didn't get there because I guess they said the junior high was on there, and so, but it was to be an actual on-ramp onto the I-15. I'm sometimes, I really admire the Planning Commission because I'm not, you guys, with the state legislature doing what they did, I'm not sure you guys know the kind of power you have. I think actually you have a little bit more ability and power than the city council does. I am going to ask, because of that when we have a new trail, and I couldn't find it in the developmental code, but my time is a little bit limited right now, but when we have a new trail go in, and I'm talking about the one on 9600 North, that we notify the surrounding neighbors. And I think within businesses, it's like 500 feet, correct me, something like that. But we need to put that in because right now, that trail is going to go in, and I'm not opposed to the trail. However, we're going to have people parking on 9600 North to get to that trail. That's going to be, the new thing, just like they do on 6000 West to get onto that trail that runs east and west. So I am hoping that you will consider that because that traffic thing on 9600 North, we don't need to add to that situation at all. And then I don't know about, this time of year, we are slammed in our neighborhood with solicitors. I don't know if you're going to revisit that, but maybe you could relook at that and see what they have because we have just a lot of people casing neighborhoods. They are dressed in black. They are not identified at all. And it's it's concerning with as many older people that we have, you know, that kind of, you know, in our area. But thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much, Liz. All right, moving on to item number 2, consent items. This will be the approval of the meeting minutes from the 25th of March, 2025. Do any of the commissioners have any comments or edits, or should we receive a motion?
Make a motion to approve the minutes from the 25th of March.
Is anybody willing to second?
I second that.
All right, super. Could we vote on that, Deborah?
Yes?
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, action items. Let's move now to these couple of items, and Rob will give us the background. But just in general, I'm sure everybody's aware of this. The state has sort of decreed these and handed down a bunch of ultimatums where we need to comply with specific things, or we need to at least have a plan to comply with certain things. So, Rob, would you be kind enough to just walk us through briefly through each one of these?
I would be happy to. Thank you. Just so you're aware, because the state, under the Utah Constitution, there's a time limit that by default, after the legislative session ends, all bills go into effect at a certain date. That is about 60 days after the legislative session ends. That date is May 7th. So all these new bills go into effect May 7th. So we're trying to do them now and then have the council approve it on May 6th. So we're ready to deal with the new state law. We have 4 items. The first one deals with property boundary adjustments, and just, yes.
Actually, Rob, would you pardon me? You and I had a conversation earlier this afternoon. Would you mind just spending 2 minutes just educating us on whether we have the liberty to tell the state to go jump in the lake, we're not doing this, or if this is something where we're compelled to do it?
I'd be happy to address that. So perhaps by way of comparison, we're all somewhat familiar with the kind of difference and tension that sometimes exists between states and the federal government. And there's times the states can say no to the federal government, and there's times where the federal government can override and impose kind of dictates on states. And there's a lot of cases and fights that happen, a lot of political fights and legal fights between those two things. The relationship that a city has to the state is very different. Where a state is not created by the federal government, a state is in kind of, we're the United States, we're a federation of states, a republic of states that join together to form a federal government. The city is created by the state. We are called a political subdivision of the state. So all of the city's powers and authority derive from state law. And if the state changes that law, that means our powers are correspondingly limited or changed. So when the state says, cities thou shalt, cities shalt. And if you don't, whoever is affected by that will have the right to challenge that legally. There's a lot of cases out there where a city passes an ordinance that's contrary to state law, and courts will routinely say, if that's in direct conflict with state law, we kick out the city ordinance and apply state law instead. So this is mostly, in some regards, we don't necessarily need to update this because state law would override it anyway. But then we have a lot of code that some people might think is the law, but actually isn't. And so for both staff and for the public, we like to try to keep our code as aligned with state law as we can.
Thank you, Rob. And then could you just clarify the difference between Senate bills versus House bills? It's just based on where it originated from, if I understand.
Correct.
Yeah.
There's some minor procedural things, but when you see SB, that's a Senate bill, so it originated in the Senate, was passed by both houses, so the Senate approves it, sends it to the House, they approve it, sometimes they go back and forth a few times, but it means it started with the Senate, and then the governor signed it to become law. HB, similar, is House bill, so it refers to a bill that started in the House and then got approved by both bodies and went to the governor. So SB is our shorthand, and HB. So you see those numbers a lot. We had last year was our record number of bills proposed for the state legislature. This year was our second most. So they are not slowing down at the state, and it is fun trying to keep up with all of it in our very short legislative window. So it's also hard because their session ends about mid-March. We try to figure out what they did in mid-April, and then we have to implement it by May. So it's a very short time window for us to get these things in place.
Can I ask a follow-up question? So if the state buys a parcel of land within the city, can they zone it to whatever they want? I know they try to work with the city, but
They
could they
try to work with it. There's some
zone
rules
it
that
to whatever
say
they want?
other governments are supposed to comply with us, but it doesn't really apply to the state. So UDOT is probably the most prime example. We can classify our roads and put all these rules about, we're not going to allow big roads or, speed limits. And then UDOT will come in, buy land, build a road and say, we don't care what you do, city, because it's our property now. And we are the state and we will do that. So if the state decided we have like the developmental center down just south of Ridgeview. That was in Highland, and we had zoned that single-family residential. The state would say, we don't care. We're still going to put this in here because we think it's necessary. So a county or another city owning property within the city would follow our zoning laws. School districts, somewhat.
But
The
the
state,
can do what they want.
because the state is the source of cities' powers, it can override us. Great. Honestly, it is training. We'll count it. So one of the changes we did, I put this little background because we just talked about this. We changed because we had a fight with the county about combining parcels and the county not recognizing it. And the state might have fixed it. So we used to have all these different processes for lot line adjustment, parcel boundary adjustments, and they've kind of cleared them all out and gave us 3 new processes. We have a boundary establishment. That's a thing that the city never gets involved in. That's where there's a gap in property records. There's a question of where the line is. The property owners figure out where the line is. They agree to it. They record something with the county. City is never involved. But if the line is already established, so like a subdivision or a county parcel record where there's no question, then the city does get involved to some extent. We now have simple boundary adjustments, which are, as you might guess, simple. They're not affecting any lot restriction from a subdivision. They're not creating new lots. They're not affecting rights of way or easements. So it's lot combinations would be a great example of a simple boundary adjustment. Or someone's shifting, a line a few feet one way or the other because they're working it out with their neighbor. The city reviews it just to make sure that it meets our zoning code, so no one's creating a tiny lot off of it. But other than that, we'd say, go do whatever you want with your property. So I am hoping that this will solve that lot combination issue we had with the county, because now it's new state law. A full boundary adjustment is everything else, and it will always require a plat amendment. So if you want to change something with your property that isn't simple, we go through the plat amendment process. And so the proposed amendments just kind of clean up a lot of our code. We refer to state law for definitions and processes. We have new land use authorities, or clarified land use authorities. So simple boundary adjustments are staff. That's how we've been doing it. So those are, again, you're approving a lot combination where there's no impact on other people's property. Staff can do that. If there's a plat amendment, it goes to council, as they have been. And then we'll give the consent to the full boundary adjustment after they get the plat amendment approved, so we can work it out with the county. And the other thing I did with the proposed amendment is that new code we put in about what happens when you combine a lot and the county doesn't recognize. I kept that in there just so going forward for this 3-year period of time where we had lot combinations, we can still recognize those as a city, so residents don't have to do it again, but they may want to under this new process. So with that, any questions on this? These are all public hearings, so I'll recommend adoption after a public hearing. And we received no comments on any of these.
All right, let's open it up for any public comments.
So
All right.
if somebody,
Jerry,
if 2 people just want to
Jerry?
move,
I mean, that's public. Let's just close the public comment.
I was responding as a resident.
Go for it.
So as a resident, I have 2 lots, and you just want to move a line. That's not affecting it. Right now it's like this, and you just want to do this.
That would be a simple adjustment. So all you do is record you have to give a survey and record something with the county, but you don't have to do a full plat amendment for it.
And this doesn't affect any of it.
Doesn't affect that.
Now you make those.
All right, let's close public comments. Rob, could you walk us through a couple of examples? So let's say Jerry and I are neighbors, we're abutting, there's a few feet difference. I thought that was in the boundary establishment category that didn't need to go to the city. It just goes straight to the recorder's office after we deed or quit claim or whatever we choose to do.
Yeah.
Could you just walk us through a few examples, please?
I will. So, if you recall the Pantos subdivision that you all approved, and a lot of residents were concerned because there's all these weird gaps and potential boundary by acquiescence and all these claims about the boundary lines. Establishing that, settling all those lines, that would be a boundary establishment under this new code. It doesn't come to the city. I don't want it to come to the city. They can settle their own property lines, record it with the county, and solve it. So that's a good example of boundary establishment. For a simple boundary adjustment, the two kind of examples I have, say the city sold some open space to someone, it's, a little parcel of ground behind their home, so now they own a lot and a little parcel of open space. They want to combine that together because they want to build a bigger deck and they want their setbacks. It's not affecting any easements, there's no streets being changed, they're not changing any kind of subdivision plat restrictions. That would be a simple boundary adjustment. So they just record a new description of the parcels with the county, as we have been doing more or less. Another example would be what Commissioner Abbott explained. Say, two lots share a line, it goes straight north-south, but because of one person loves a tree that's on the other person's yard, or a fence was built diagonally, so say, let's just agree to shift our boundary. There's no question that the boundary is where it is. Everyone knew, the plat is clear where the line is. But for some reason, they want to move it a little bit. Or maybe one person doesn't want to own as much property anymore, so they want to go down as small as they can and sell their property to their neighbor. So we could do that as potentially a simple boundary adjustment, as long as there's no easements or rights of way being affected.
Can that happen with no money exchanged?
That would be between the property owners.
Okay, so that's completely up to them. Okay.
That would come to the city, and we would review that just to make sure, say they're shrinking one lot, that you're not falling below the R140 standard or whatever's on it. Make sure, okay, you still got enough frontage, you still have the right, size of lot, and as soon as we say, okay, you meet our code, go do what you want, and we'll give a consent form to it that they go record with the county. Go ahead.
I just had one other question or scenario. Say I have a half-acre lot in Highland, and I happen to own 1 foot all the way around half of it, and it has its own tax ID and it's its own separate thing. Can I then take that, we'll say it's an acre, can I take that line, push it in, and make 2 half-acre lots legally? Even though it says I can't make a lot, I already have 2 lots. They're just one's compliant and one's not.
So, great question. And the answer is actually no. Because if you're creating a new unit, it says lot, parcel, or dwelling unit. So if it's land that could have not been developed before, and you're now making it a buildable lot, you'll have to go through the subdivision process for that. But that is a great question.
It's just going from 1 lot to 2 lots.
Yeah, 1 lot to 2 lots is still subdivision. Now, we could exempt those small things from our subdivision process, but the city's historically said anytime you create new parcels, new buildable parcels, or you're somehow increasing the number of properties within an area, we'll just go through a subdivision process and get a plat.
But the answer is yes, you can do it. You just have to go through the subdivision.
Yes.
So the key is I'm not creating 2 separate lots. They already exist. One's just not compliant, and I can't make it compliant.
Exactly.
So this is a real scenario that somebody wants to do and ask me
Making
about.
it
So,
buildable.
Yes.
okay, thank you.
We actually have, there's some property down off, I think, 96 that I got, 50 calls about, because it's a lot that was subdivided, and next to it is some common space ground that was supposed to be part of a different subdivision but got sold off. And I got so many calls saying, oh, can I make those 2 lots and build it on each? I said, that other parcel is not a lot. It was open space ground. So if you want to do it, you have to go through the subdivision process, and also you can't, because you can't meet zoning because you don't have enough property for it. So to that example, yes, it comes up, but that would require subdivision, and we'd check to make sure it meets zoning.
Any other questions or comments? Would anybody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that Planning Commission approve the process to amend the related boundary adjustments as described. Did I say that right? Related to the boundary adjustments, thank you.
And I'll second.
All right, let's do roll call.
Yes.
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 Back to you, Rob.
Thank you. Next one deals with fire code appendices. So this is an odd one, and this one deals with House Bill 368, which is, I don't know if you clicked on it, is like a 10,000 line. It is the biggest bill I think that got passed. It was fun to read through. So the state adopts fire and building codes that apply statewide. And we've always thought a part of that, there's like fire code, and then there's like a bunch of appendices to it. We always assumed when the state adopted the fire code that it included the fire code, all of it. Except in HB 368, there's one little line in the middle of it that says, a municipality may adopt and enforce any appendix of the International Fire Code, which suddenly made us all panic thinking, okay, apparently the state's telling us they're not already adopted. And these appendices provide very specific regulations kind of on very specific cases. The biggest kind of thing that I'm familiar with is Appendix D, which deals with fire access roads. So if you all, Blue Bison, the development that was coming in, their fight was they could only have 50 homes off of one access. That rule is found in Appendix D, which sets out how many units you can have off of a single access road before you have to build a second connecting point. They could never get a second road up there, so they were limited to 50. If we don't adopt Appendix D, there's no strict rule about that for fire code purposes. I talked with our fire chief, our fire marshal, building official. They said, adopt them all. And because if this is now a city thing, if someone comes in and says, this fire code is too restrictive, we at least have a baseline to start from, and we can look at, okay, this appendix, maybe we don't need to adopt. But we would rather start with kind of all fire code that's recommended internationally. And then if someone says, this one isn't really needed for the city, we can then evaluate that on a case-by-case basis. So we would recommend adopting all of the appendices.
So I had a question on that one.
Yes.
I kind of read each topic, but not in full detail. My big question is, how does it work with grandfathered in? Is there any grandfathered in? How does that work?
Yes, generally, like most zoning codes, things get grandfathered in if they are built correctly to law at the time. But as soon as they get touched, so there's renovations, they have to come up to current code. This often happens in commercial. Say a building was built, years and years ago where we didn't require fire sprinklers. But basically all commercial buildings now require fire sprinklers. If a new tenant goes in, we'll say, now you provide fire sprinklers. You're improving your space again and touching it. But now if it just stays the way it is, keeps being used, Macy's stays there forever and they're not going to remodel it, we're not going to say, well, the 2025 fire code says you have to do this. We'll leave it as is until they remodel it or someone else comes in to take it over.
So one of my questions about this is like in-home businesses, which was another thing we were going to talk about. So I was trying to find something in there that might explain more. Did you know where that was? I did not see anything.
I don't.
And how that affects in-home businesses, because that would affect a lot in our community.
I don't believe it affects too much. The only thing that it might affect is if a home business stores hazardous materials, which isn't many. Most of them aren't dealing with things that are explosive. But you could foresee some that, like ammunition, could be a potential thing. If it got to that level, I think like with firearms, if you're going to buy and sell, you have to get registered with the government, and then we do a fire inspection then. But most of our homes we would never do.
So nothing like adding sprinkling systems and stuff to home business and things like that?
No, not just for that.
If they've already passed a fire code for business license, then
applied, then they're good.
Okay.
And then, Rob, just to confirm, when I was reading through it, there's a passage in there, and I didn't neglect it to write it down, but it basically says we adopt the state code, and if something is omitted from the state, we refer to the 2021 fire standards, just as our default as a city. Okay.
Yes. This HB 368 was very specific that we can adopt appendices of the 2021 fire code, which is odd. They didn't just say appendices of the state fire code. So I wrote it kind of as we're adopting those, and if the state changes something, we're still going to adopt whatever appendices of the fire code exist in case something changes and we don't catch it in time.
Yeah, great. Any other comments? Would anybody like to make a motion?
Public hearing.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Terribly sorry, public. Any public comment on the topic? Okay. Thank you. All right, we'll close public comments. And would anybody like to make a motion?
I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the proposed amendments related to the adoption of fire code appendices. Commission may make different additional recommendations. No, we'll skip that part.
All right, roll call.
I don't think we made any additional ones.
Second.
Oh, second by...
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I didn't get my yes in.
Yes.
Yes.
I was hearing second.
Tracy second.
Yes, so Tracy seconded. Yes.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Item C on the procedure for classification and approval of new business uses.
Thank you. This is something the state, again, has imposed as a requirement. One I haven't seen many people talk about. I was a little worried about it, but then I realized we already do this in the city. In 2 of our zones, we already have language, and I put up the PO zone language that says if we didn't list a use as allowed, here's a process by which we can allow it. And so I essentially took that and expanded it to apply to all of our commercial zones because that's what SB 179 requires. We have to have 2 new processes. One, to classify uses. Classification of a use is what staff does informally all the time. And I have some examples I'll get to in a second. The kind of other one is approving a new use. So it's not listed in like our list of 15 things that are allowed in this zone. Does this use still meet the intent of the zone? Should it be allowed in there? So those are the new processes. So as examples, so classification. I got a business license today that I approved, and it was a request for a health and wellness spa located in the C1 zone over by Macy's. I looked at the C1 zone text, and it says it allows, as an allowed use, not conditionally, just allowed use, is personal services, such as barber, beauty shops, and tanning salons, and also allows medical offices. So when I see health and wellness spa, that's in the same vein as either of those things. It completely matches which an existing use, and the uses are kind of a such as, so it's not a hard limit on what's allowed. So I said, that's allowed. For a new use, this would be the same process that the commission went through for Zana Jewelry, where it was not a use that was specifically allowed in the PO zone, but they were saying, we think we can meet the intent of the PO zone, and the commission discussed that and ultimately approved it with conditions that they still meet the intent of the PO zone, so it wasn't used for retail. They couldn't have a showroom, and we've worked with them to make sure they keep following that. So this would be, so Zana is an example of what got approved as a new use, something that wasn't expressly listed in there, but kind of matched the PO zone as long as they met certain conditions the commission imposed. So I've now expanded that, as required by state law, to all commercial zones. This doesn't apply to any residential zones. It doesn't require us to allow businesses, commercial businesses in residential zones. It's just for non-residential zones already. Staff, as we currently are doing, will do the classification portion, but if we decide this doesn't really align with something, then we kick it on to you have to go through the new or a text amendment process, and that goes to council and potentially planning commission. The thing I wanted the commission to kind of weigh in on, I took the existing kind of criteria we use for the PO zone and then expanded it. Since we're going to apply this everywhere, I wanted to give as many reasons and things for us to look at to make sure it really meets the intent of the zone if we're going to allow a new use. And so I listed them here. The first one is compatibility of the proposed business use with the plain language of zoning regulations. So this is what I'm thinking. The PO zone says, thou shalt not have retail. So if you're going to propose something with retail, the plain language says, no way, that doesn't work. The next criteria I threw in there was compatibility with the intent and purpose of the potential zones. So every zone has a little purpose statement that explains what's supposed to go in there. So I want to make sure, does this use align with that purpose statement? Compatibility of the proposed business use with the general plan. If our general plan says something about commercial in an area, I want to make sure it matches that. Compatibility of the use with adjacent properties. How's this going to affect other properties nearby? Is it really drastically, and this kind of goes with the next one, which is the nature, scope, and impact of the use. We're approving a use, that's high intensity retail, and every other use next to it is, small offices, low customer traffic. That doesn't seem like it matches the intent. The final two deal with whether the use is allowed or prohibited either in this zone or another zone. If it's allowed in a different zone, that suggests we didn't allow it in this zone for a reason. We could have. We put it somewhere else, so you should go to that other zone. And if it's expressly prohibited, then it's not allowed. So are there any other criteria you could think of that we should apply in deciding whether a use should be allowed in a zone or not? You can keep pondering on that, because that's the end of my presentation on this. And again, we recommend approval after a public hearing.
Okay, let's open it up for any public comment.
So this doesn't really, Elizabeth Rice. So this doesn't really have anything to do with home businesses, right? Okay. Okay. So in the past, in Planning Commission, things like, and maybe you're not removing that, or this is to be replaced completely, but things like check cashing places, tattoo parlors, those were prohibited.
Yes.
And I am assuming that
Stays in place.
stays in place.
Thank you, Liz. Anybody else? Okay, we'll close the time for public comments, and then commissioners, any questions or complaints or inquiries? Any suggestions to answer Rob's question about proposed categories for evaluation?
I just wanted to say, I think this will make it so much easier for citizens and people looking for code to see where to go. I just think this is so much clearer. So congratulations. Thank you for your help. I appreciate it.
Okay, going once, gone. Would anybody like to make a motion?
I can do that. I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the proposed amendments related to classification of business uses.
Second?
All right, let's do roll call, please.
Yes?
Yes.
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 Thank you. And
Sorry. There we go.
land use regulation update, if you could do that for us.
So I mentioned HB 368, that really long bill. This is a lot of the other things in it. HB 368 changed a lot of things. Some of them we're not going to directly address in our code. There's a lot of things about building permits, a lot of strict timelines that got implemented that our building department's going to figure out how to handle. But we don't have that in our code already. We just talk about, you can't build without a building permit, so we'll just keep relying on state law for that. There's some things about notice changes, which we didn't specifically say one way or the other in our code, so we'll just follow that. With that, I do want to, just for the benefit of the Planning Commission and any public, the big notice change is whenever you change a land use regulation, so you affect a zone, the notice requirements under state law suggested that you're supposed to mail notice to any affected property owner, which makes a lot of sense. Say you're changing a business zone and you're removing uses from it. You should let everyone in that zone know that you're potentially doing that, or you're potentially rezoning their property before you make that decision. But there was no limit on that. So if we updated a fence ordinance, that applies everywhere in the city. And state law suggested that that might mean we need to mail a notice to every single property in Highland City, which we've never done. So one of the big notice changes, they said, if you're doing ministerial code changes, and they define what that is. So you are affecting all zones, or all of the property within a zone, or you're updating your code to meet state law, you just provide notice as a normal, what they call Class B, which is or Class A notices, which is our normal, also on the city's website, public notice website here. But if you're still going to any part of your code change that you're proposing is more specific than that, then you have to do that mailed notice still. So they loosened it up for things that honestly we weren't doing anyway. We weren't mailing notice to everyone when we our lot and parcel combinations affect every zone in the city, but we didn't mail notice to everyone about that.
So when we changed the maximum height of a retaining wall to 4 feet or whatever that was supposed to go out to everybody?
Theoretically, yes,
And we just posted it on our website?
we did.
Oh,
But it said, post it website, post it on your bulletin board, post it on the state website, and mail it to anyone who was affected.
So can't that just be included in our newsletter? In the utility bill?
Well, I guess we could have. We just have never kind of gone
Because
that
that
way.
combines it and kind of saves a whole extra mailing.
We've just never done it. And unless you want to give us direction to do it, we're going to keep not doing it, to be
oh,
honest.
I thought the state was requiring us.
No, they were saying the way that every city's been doing it, which is not mailing that notice out to everyone, that's fine now. They
Oh.
just recognize that
Oh.
no one has been doing that.
I
So
was
they
just gonna
changed state
say
law.
we have a lot of first time homeowners, especially in our high density area.
Yes.
And there's a lot of, and I have 3 children who are new homeowners who are clueless. And they don't even know they're supposed to get, permits for fences and blah, blah. It's not even on their radar. So I'm just suggesting some of these things that we do change or that we don't allow certain things, materials or whatnot for fence or whatever, having that listed in our utility or our mailer that comes with our utility is helpful.
That's not a bad idea, and I think we could do better at communicating city requirements.
Yeah.
We don't want to put it in every utility bill but we could probably do better at maybe having a little planning portion of the newsletter that people actually read, like a heads up of here's some things you might need to know about Highland City. So we can work on that as better communication.
I agree with that, though. I like the idea. And even if, especially for the young people or people who just, because they're going to catch one of them. And once they start catching it, because they might not see it in there or read it or whatever, but eventually they catch it, then they start, oh, I'm going to read this, and then they'll start paying more attention. Also, we can say, it's in the newsletter,
Yeah.
Also, I think more people would read the newsletter.
Yes. So those are things just as description of what state law changed that we're not going to show here. I just wanted to give you the heads up. 3 areas of our code that we are going to change deal with appeal hearings, annexation, and the biggest one is subdivision bonding requirements. Did you kill them on?
I don't know. There's so many cords under here. It's all right. I'll share it. Oh, I did something.
Okay, great. Oh,
I'll send you a bill for that.
first one, state law, this HB 368 says you can't hold public hearings on land use appeals or variances. We haven't really been doing that, but we have some references to hearings. This makes sense in the sense of a land use hearing. This is an appeal. So the planning commission approved a plat, and someone wants to challenge it. It's more like a court proceeding than a city proceeding. We have a hearing officer that we've appointed who comes in and conducts a hearing. So it's supposed to be a little more restrictive and more formal of a process. You're supposed to actually present arguments and argue back and forth. I don't know. I'm kind of torn on it, but state law has said no public hearings. Still a public meeting, so we'll still advertise it as a public meeting that people can attend, but it just means whoever is not part of the appeal process cannot participate in that appeal.
So it's like an arbitration?
It'll be more just like
And does that person pay for that, or does the city pay for that?
they pay for it. Well, we pay for it, but we charge them a fee.
And
So
commission and council are not involved.
No. So this is, remember we talked about kind of land use authority? You might be the land use authority, but we have an appeal authority who is an independent attorney. He's Craig Call. He runs the Land Use Institute of Utah. He's one of the he's been doing land use law since before I was born. So we have an excellent appeal authority. I've done some variances with him. We've gotten good decisions. So
And everybody's bound to whatever he does.
yes. So the appeal authority proceedings will be public as a meeting, just won't be a public hearing any longer. So the proposed code changes just strike every reference of hearing within our code, related just to appeals. Doesn't change anything with our, subdivision process or any of our code changes. We still do public hearings as normal for all of that. This is very specific to one type of proceeding that is honestly pretty rare. The next thing they changed, and this is something I feel like every 2 years the state changes something with annexation. It just has been a very ongoing change, and it's one that we just can't keep up with. And so every time an annexation happens, we just look at state law anyway. So what I propose is just taking out most of everything in our code that references annexation. We just say, if annexation, someone wants to annex, we follow state law for it. The only thing I really recommend keeping in is where I talk about how broad the city's discretion in to approve, deny, or conditionally approve annexation. It's a very legislative decision. The Vista Ridge subdivision, that 2-lot subdivision that we're doing the DAB on Thursday, that was an annexation last year, and the council had them fill out an annexation agreement that's, I don't know, 7-10 pages long that said, if you're going to annex, record this against your property, and those set the terms by which you get to come into the city. So I want to make sure we retain all the authority to do that, to condition it, require them to pay fees, dedicate land, do whatever the council believes is necessary for it. Other than that, we just say, in terms of the nitty-gritty of how we go from application to being part of Highland, we follow state law for that. And the final big change is something we're all going to be struggling with staff-wise for a long time, which is how we do subdivision bonds. So just by way of background information, when you approve a final, well, you don't anymore, when the DAB approves a final plat for a subdivision, it has to get recorded with the county before they can sell lots. You have to actually divide the property into lots to sell them. But to record a plat, you have to do one of two things. Either complete all of the improvements in the subdivision and then provide a warranty bond, and then you can go record, or you give a completion bond that says, here's the amount of all incomplete public improvements. I will post this as a bond, so if I fail to put it in, me saying developer, the city can take that money and put it in and finish the improvements at using my money. That's kind of, I don't know, we get, it's more often we get, as Highland, a full completion bond, or they'll do some level of improvements and say, okay, how much do I have left? And then I'll bond for that amount left. So that's just, those are the two kinds of bonds we're talking about. It's the completion, meaning this is the money that I would need to pay to actually finish all the improvements. And then we take 10% of that as a warranty bond, meaning we want to make sure for at least 1 year after you complete your improvements that everything stays intact. The road doesn't collapse and we have to fix it later. And after that, we have a little warranty bond for it. So this is the biggest change. So now we need to have a specific land use authority for bonding issues. I've proposed our city engineer, public works director, because he's the one who decides everything with public improvements anyway. Before, a bond used to just be for the subdivision. And now it's kind of that, but it has to be categorized for each category of an infrastructure. And those are 7 different categories: culinary system, sewer system, stormwater system, transportation, PI system, landscaping, public parks, trails, and open space. So that means before, a developer would come in and bond for their subdivision, and they would get partial releases as they completed improvements. We would return some of the money because we didn't need it all because some of it had been completed. Now it's by category of improvement. So if they complete their culinary, all their underground utilities, culinary, PI, sewer, they might ask, say, can you release our bond? And they'll be entitled to, under state law, release our bond for those categories. So we look at, okay, you gave us $1 million and you had $200,000 in each of those categories for the improvements. We'll now release for those categories, but we're going to keep the full amount for roads, storm sewer, or storm drains, landscaping. So it requires a lot more tracking on staff side. We'll see how it works out. We also have strict timelines to complete inspections, to provide, if we reject, so say, it's all 15 days. So developer says, I've now put in all my roads, please come inspect them to see if there's anything I've not done to city standard. We have 15 days from that request to actually complete our inspection. If we say, no, the asphalt's buckling, or it's raised up here, it's not safe to drive on, doesn't meet city spec, we have to explain that to them in a written response within 15 days after we say, no, this isn't good enough. And if we fail to do that, they kind of have like a little appeal process, say, well, you haven't given me your list timely, give me the list, and if we fail to do that, they get their bond refunded. part of it. I actually need to ask the commission, there's one additional insertion I need to make, because when I wrote it, I realized I missed some important language, because that refund, if we fail to timely respond to them, isn't for the entire bond, it's just for the category. So I put that in the motion. I've underlined it here. It's for the proposed amendments there.
So does the warranty start when you release the bond or when the subdivision is bought off?
Not entirely clear. The code is not written super well, to be honest. So we used to require warranty bonds up front. You'd provide your completion and warranty bond right at the beginning. Now we cannot require a warranty bond up front. But I think it is clear enough that we only go into warranty once they ask us to go into warranty, and we've completed the inspection and approved it.
On each piece
But
or when
I
it's
don't
done?
know that answer.
It should be when it's done.
We are going to take, the position staff is taking is that it's still for the subdivision. We're not going to have 7 different warranty periods based
Yeah,
on
where
category,
it
because
all-
that is impossible to track.
And it's not being used.
And it's not being used, it's not actually in place. And if it's like, you put your water in, but what if you damage it with your roads? Like, what warranty is that?
Or until you start using them.
So we've heard from the league that they might be doing a little bit of tweaks to this because it's not quite clear in the interim session that'll happen this summer. So I'm hoping they clarify some of that. So staff's position is still that it's by subdivision, not by category for warranties. Because I don't want 7 warranty periods
Right.
per development.
I agree with that. Does this also allow for cash bonds where you could put up a cash bond and draw against that?
Yes. So something that might be something we change. So currently the city's required to allow 2 forms of bonds. We do a letter of credit, which is basically a bank says, we have an account that has this amount of money on it and it's yours if you need it. And we actually have an original copy of the letter of credit, which means if Chris Trusty walks in with that letter to the bank, they will give him the money or give the city the money. The other form we do is cash. So they give us or another bank with an agreement, put money in escrow, that is the value of it. One of the changes from HB 368 is now that cash escrow has to accrue interest. And we have to track it, and we have to return the interest to the developer, which sounds reasonable. I have no problem with that. The problem is the city holds 20 different cash bonds, and we put it all in one account, and they all accrue interest together, but they all they come in and get released at different times. So we're going to have to figure out how to allocate interest to different bonds. And when they ask for it partially, say we did half our improvements, now we want half of our bond released. You have to figure, okay, so now you get half of the interest that has accrued since you put it in for your. It's going to cause
This is
headaches.
a separate ledger for everyone.
So we're actually thinking, we're going to discuss internally about maybe suggesting the other type of bond that is allowed, that many cities do, is a surety bond, which is essentially an insurance policy. We don't love that because it's harder to collect. It's more like dealing with insurance. If we have to go in and actually get the money to do improvements, surety,
Fight every
it's a fight with them. A cash bond is easy. We just say, that's our money, and we're going to go spend it. However, the city has rarely had to collect on a bond. So we're wondering if the administrative burden of tracking interest on a cash bond is worth the need to have it more liquid. We're not sure yet. That's a conversation that's ongoing. State law just says have 2 forms. We meet that. We're just going to have to figure out interest on bonds.
And the only reason a developer puts up that bond is so he could pre-sell, right?
Yes. It's so they can sell lots while still doing improvements, which makes a lot of sense. They'll do that because they want incoming cash revenues so they can actually fund the improvements they're putting in. So that's why they'll put a bond and record so they can sell lots, get money, finish the improvements. And it works out most of the time. I think I've covered everything in here. We also charge a 10% administrative fee. Not charge. It's 10% of the bond is added on as administrative cost. So if the city has to collect the money, we incur a lot of cost to do that. Engineering fees, attorney fees, all those fights, public works fees, have to go coordinate improvements. So we have a little bit of extra money that will stay now for the entirety of the subdivision until the end of warranty. Okay, that is all of the changes. Just as I mentioned, we're going to review our current bonding procedures. What we propose meets state law. We're trying to figure out, is there a better way for us to now, with these additional kind of administrative requirements, are there better ways for us to run bonding at a staff level? So you may see some amendments in the future to our code that address that. We have like a warranty bond that's been pending for 3 years because they never asked for a final inspection. We should either collect the money and finish anything that's out there or release it. But it's just tracking these things has been difficult for the city. So we're going to work on our processes on the back end and see if we need to do any code amendments. But again, this is a public hearing. We recommend approval with the one little caveat, additional insertion I'd recommend, but I'm also happy to answer any additional questions regarding any of this. I know it's a lot. This was a hefty bill.
Thank you very much, Rob. Let's open it up for public comments.
I do have a question about like the inspections and, you know, like if we're going to do something with the roads, but it's snow on the roads, 15-day, you know, thing, how does that, can we
There is
still
an
take care of
exception
the other
for
stuff?
winter conditions specifically.
Yeah, that would be, okay, for the weather. And have we been good about, as soon as the snow melts, take care of it?
Yes, and in fact, these timelines we're not worried about. We always get our crews out there to do inspections. 15 days is not something we're worried about. We've always been able to do that. So this is more directed at other cities that have not been able to do that.
Right. Liz, do you have something? A public comment?
Ouch. Well, I don't know what developer in the state legislature wrote this. I would love to know. I can look it up. I'm glad to do that. It seems to me that the state legislature is taking more and more power away from the city by doing this. I know, even at my credit union, and I have a bank, I mean, if you have 21 open account or bonds, they will only let me open up like 8 accounts. So that, I don't know if you need to increase the amount on like your administrative fee on more than 10%, or if that's even legal. Okay, it's not legal. That's all I really had. I just, wow.
Oh, thank you very much, Liz. Anybody else? If not, we'll conclude public comment. And commissioners, questions, thoughts?
We're recommending AI right now
I
as
have
a
a
helper for you.
I have a question on the
Yes.
building permits.
Yes.
So I've been in cities where that went into effect, and it actually made it worse because the city had a policy that the time doesn't start until a complete submittal. And if they're missing one little thing, they kick it back, kick it back, kick it back. I assume that's what we would do.
So that's actually what part of what HB 368 addresses is a few years ago, they imposed a really strict timeline, 14 business days, which for us still includes Friday, even though we don't work it, to turn around any building permit for a single family, 2-family, or townhome project. So those were very strict requirements put in a few years ago. But what Commissioner Abbott is saying is cities kept saying, okay, we have that deadline, so we're going to say it doesn't start because your application's incomplete. You missed something you didn't submit, the statement that construction will comply with 2021 IRC. You missed something, and they'll keep kicking it back because they don't want to trigger that 14 days until they have to. HB 368 says, no. You get 3 days to review an application from submittal to determine whether it's complete. And if you don't respond and kick it back in that time, 14 days starts immediately. It's something I think that's going to affect a lot of other cities. Talking to our staff, we were fine with this. We almost always have complied with those restrictions anyway. We're just going to be better about making sure if there really is a problem with an application up front, we get very clear, we kick it back, we can pause those 3 days, and then when they correct it, they'll get it back and we'll move on. We're not going to keep kicking it back and forth, and actually 368 also clarifies you can only require one submission of plans. And only if because there's something wrong with the building permit that affects the structure or foundation or footprint of the building. If it's something else with it, you didn't show a truss in the right place, the building official was supposed to redline it on the plans and say, we'll catch that in the field. So our building, and I think this is kind of to the point Liz Rice was making, which is state adopts code that addresses every municipality in Utah, all 250 odd of us. Highland is not the one that has been the reason for these code amendments, but there was some city out there where they were not doing warranty inspections within 15 days. They were taking 2 or 3 months to get back. The problem that always happens, though, is when the state does this, it affects all of us equally. And the other problem that's almost kind of disappointing is most of the time, like the cities that I've worked with and Highland, we, I think, try to work with developers pretty well. They're bringing something to the city that we need. We want them to succeed. So we usually try to work on timing to make it work out. But it's like with the whole subdivision process that got changed a couple of years ago. It wasn't that Highland had a problem with it, but now I see that we have 20 days to do a review. And sometimes that means we will take exactly 20 days to do a review, where before we might have done it in 2 weeks. But because now the state says, thou shalt do it in this time frame, we say, okay, we will do it in that time frame, but not sooner, because we have a lot going on. And they keep adding more administrative burdens, so we'll meet to comply. We will always comply with state law. But
What's the penalty if you go day one over?
in this case, it means we can't do a plan review for building permits. So if we miss our window, they just get to start building.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So it could be an unsafe building.
Completely unsafe building.
No one's.
They'll still do inspections,
They'll still do it.
and they'll might catch things there,
Okay.
but there will be things that arise because if someone doesn't do a plan review and now they start building and it's going to be too hard to catch later on, they'll work it out in the field somehow.
And how does that work if an inspector catches something and it's in the field? What time frame? Where does it go there?
So a good example of this, we had a commercial building that has an elevator that we had some problems with because we actually had a third party do the plan inspection for it. Didn't catch that it was missing some fire blocking. The architect didn't catch that it had fire block. It was missing fire blocking around the elevator. The builder missed it, and it was coming down to inspection. Our inspector, our building official, went out and said, "That's not safe. That doesn't meet fire code, and is a liability. It's not just we'd like to have. This is like a health and safety thing." So in that case, we worked with the owner, but we required them to pull out parts of the venting that had been done and install it correctly. So there's times we'll do that. I will say our building official knows, he's been doing this for a long time. He knows when something is necessary versus desired. And sometimes like, okay, let's get the best we can here. But when it comes to health and safety, he's like, no, you have to do that. And honestly, a lot of times setback and zoning code things are things that are not as necessary. So if they're off by a few inches, and we'll say, close enough.
We did, but Liz, if you'd like to say something, please, we'll reopen for public comments. Just come up, Liz.
Pull your chair up.
I'm just wondering, this really isn't that important, but I'm just wondering if any city, larger city, has even thought about challenging these last 3 bills.
So, yes. As we had the discussion earlier, there's a limit to what cities can challenge because the state controls city powers. So, often our challenges happen during the legislative session, and sometimes there are some strong kind of sectors of our legislature that have certain interests. The League of Cities and Towns is kind of our representative up there, and they do a good job of pushing back at a lot of these things. Sometimes it's more of we know this bill is going to pass. There's not a way of stopping the bill, but we can influence how it gets passed to make it as palatable as possible. So sometimes let's negotiate to get to a middle ground, because we know there's going to be something. We try sometimes.
Thank you, Rob. Any other questions or comments?
No, my apologies for posing my question during public time. So we got to have hers during our time. So we just traded. So.
And here's the proposed motion. You'll see the additional language. You don't need to state that. If you just read that first bullet point, that includes what I've listed there.
Okay, if there are no more questions or any discussion, would any of the commissioners like to make a motion?
I'll make the motion. I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the proposed amendments related related annexation bonding hearings, and other land use matters with the additional amendments recommended by staff.
Would anybody be willing to second that?
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. And roll call?
Yes.
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 Super. All right, just moving on. The one we all been waiting for with bated breath. On the 13th of May, we'll have a discussion about land use, and this is in that same forum where we'll have a combination of planning commissioners, city staff and city council, and then also presumably some representatives from our other folks. And is that at 5 o'clock, 5:30, 6:30?
6 o'clock now.
6 p.m.
Yep. So the city council meetings are now at 6 o'clock beginning in May. You're not.
Yeah, we remain
stayed
at
at
7
7.
p.m. Okay, then any questions about future meetings? All right. Would anybody like to make a motion to adjourn the proceedings? We don't have anything else, do we, Rob?
I move we adjourn tonight's proceedings.
Do we have a second? Second. Okay, roll call. Does everybody agree?
Yes, I agree with that.
You're here.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. Thanks for all the explanations and examples.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. That was in 27. Okay.